Hey folks, I'm Tom Fleming. I'm going to be your instructor for this summer. If you're taking either Physics 241 or 242, you're watching the introduction video where I talk about what's going to happen and how this is going to work, and make sure that you guys know your way around the website so that you know where to look for stuff and where to find stuff. Um, I'm making one video for both Physics 241 and 242, but most of what I'm going to be talking about will apply equally to both classes. So hopefully won't confuse anyone there. Um, Having said that, let's go ahead and take a look at the syllabus and get a sense of what needs to happen and what resources you have available to you. So here's the course syllabus for the course. This is the 241 syllabus, but the 242 syllabus is going to be similar in most of the ways that are going to matter for this discussion. The first thing I should point out is contact information. Uh, Physics can be a tough class, and it can require a lot of help. And so I try to make sure that I'm always very accessible to my students, um, even in this virtual environment. Obviously, if you want to get in touch with me, the easiest way to do that is by sending me an email at tfleming@jcsu.edu. However, one thing that I've noticed students have often done is they've sent me emails through the Canvas interaction, and that works fine. Don't get me wrong. However, it's I've noticed a little bit slower. Like it will take longer for the email to go from Canvas to my inbox. And so if you want to have a quick turnaround time on the conversation, it's probably better to email me directly rather than to use the Canvas. I also have had some situations where I suspect that maybe the notification from Canvas is being eaten by my spam filters, and that's unfortunate. So, uh, you know, it's probably better to email directly. It's an easy to remember email address, and it'll avoid some headaches. Now, there are situations where maybe email is just not going to cut it. Sometimes you need to talk to me right now because it's an emergency. Give you an example of when that might be. So last semester, it was final exam time. And the final exam consisted of uh, a browser input where you typed answers into a browser. But more importantly, you had to submit your work for partial credit. And that was a separate assignment. And the rule was, the exam you had 2 hours for. And so you worked on the browser inputs for 2 hours. And then you'd upload your work within 10 to 15 minutes at most of finishing the exam. The idea was I didn't want someone to take the exam, open it up, spend 2 hours, and then continue working on those problems for several more hours and then submit their work with additional time, because that's not fair. So that was the rule, is that if you couldn't submit your work within about 10 to 15 minutes, you needed to make sure that I knew why that was immediately. And I had a student who I had to reject their work because they said that they had computer problems, but they didn't send me an email about it for like 15 more hours. Like that was when the email was sent to me. It was 15 hours later. And I can't accept that at that point because it's just I can't verify that they weren't taking that extra time that other students weren't allowed to take advantage of to work on the exam. So if you were in a situation like that where you're trying to submit an assignment, but maybe there's technical difficulties, the way you need to address that is by calling that Google Voice number ASAP. Now, when you call the Google Voice number that's listed here on the syllabus, what's going to happen is my cell phone is going to ring. My office phone in the JCSU office that I haven't seen for 2 months, that's going to ring. My house phone is going to ring. My tablet is going to start making noise at me. My computer window will pop up a little browser notice that I'm being called. So literally every device that I own is going to tell me that you are calling me. So I'm definitely going to get that message. Usually I'll pick up. If I don't, it means that I'm indisposed for whatever reason, and you should leave a voicemail. And if you leave that voicemail, it's going to transcribe that voicemail as a text message and send it to me as a text. So I'll be able to read it even if I can't physically talk to you. Um, yeah, I'll get an email with a transcription of that voicemail message. Uh, but you'll definitely get a hold of me ASAP. And so, that's the way you need to contact me in an emergency. Now, please bear in mind that I occasionally like to go to sleep. And if you call me at 2 a.m., I will probably be cross with you because I do not expect my phone to ring at 2 a.m. So if you're calling me at a weird hour, you better have a good reason for it. Please don't abuse that privilege. I would hate for that to happen. But those are my availability times. Let's talk about office hours. I like to have a lot of office hours. And, originally this was going to be a ground-based summer class. And the schedule for the ground-based summer class had me teaching Physics 242 from 9:30 to 11:30, Monday through Thursday. And then it had me teaching Physics 241 from 11:30 to 1:30, Monday through Thursday. Uh, my intention was to have office hours basically immediately after I got out of class from 1:30 to 4:30 those first 4 days of the week. Even though we're not necessarily synchronous this semester, uh, just for my own sake of scheduling, I'm probably going to be recording new lectures at the original class times. I highly encourage you guys to show up for those. You can ask me questions. You can interact. You can make sure that I don't have to have the awkward conversations where I'm talking to no one because I hate that. Like this conversation here, which I really hate. So you're more than welcome to show up for those class meetings, just like you would a regular class. But my office hours will be after that. Uh, you know, for those 4 days. I also recognize that some of you guys are not in Charlotte anymore. Sometimes you're in other time zones, and maybe those hours just don't work for you. Well, it's not a big deal for the class meetings because you can always watch the video recordings whenever you get around to it. But for office hour visits, it's probably important to me to be accessible sometime outside of standard hours. And right now, tentatively, what I have is Monday night from like 5 to 8. I'm putting myself on call. Make an appointment during those hours, and I'll set aside the time for you. I don't have anything going on during those times normally, so I'm usually free on that particular evening. Um, there's a survey that we'll talk about in a minute, and if maybe that doesn't work for you guys, or there's another time that does, I may change those office hours later in the semester to better fit as many students as possible. But that's what we're going with right now. So when it comes to office hours, what you'll want to do is if it's a scheduled office hour, you can just drop in. And the way that will work is we're using Zoom. And if you look on the website, you can see there's a tab here, and here's a Zoom window. And if you go to that Zoom window, you can see that I have meetings set up where I'll be recording new lectures for posting for the class. But I also have what they call my personal meeting room, and that's where I have office hours. So it's not any of these meetings. It's instead my personal meeting room. And my personal meeting room has the same number, right? It's that number right there. So what you'll do is when you go into Zoom, you'll you'll go into a meeting ID, and that's the meeting ID you want to go to. That'll take you to my personal waiting room. And usually during office hours, when I don't have anybody there, I'll have a Zoom session running in the background, and I'll be doing whatever it is I need to be doing. And you can just drop in, the doorbell will chime, and I'll be able to address whatever you've got going on. There's a password. The password for all of my meetings always are the first 6 digits of pi, 314159. If you get a password, that's certainly it. But you can just drop in. If there are people in the meeting with me already, if we're talking about something that's like FERPA protected and it's important that they have privacy, there's a waiting room enabled so that you can't just drop in on someone unannounced. But if we're just working on homework stuff, usually I'll let you in and we can address your issues. But during the scheduled office hour times, that's how we'll run this. If you still have trouble, a lot of times I'll just send you this link in an email, and that will get you into the same place. And once I send you an office hour email link, uh, for one meeting, it's the same link for every subsequent meeting. So you don't have to keep asking for additional links. It will always be the same room for all my office hours. So that's how that will work. Um, cool. Let's go back through the syllabus real quick. So things you're going to need, obviously you'll need a calculator. It'll need to be a scientific calculator, which can do sines and cosines and other trig functions. Those are the big things. It doesn't have to necessarily be one of these super extensive things. I'm a big fan of the TI-30 series. Those are all like less than $20, and they have all the functions you could possibly need for this class. The Casio FX series is also really good. Also between $10 and $20, super cheap. Definitely get a scientific calculator. You'll need one. Good news for you in terms of textbooks, and that's that the textbook for this course is going to cost you the bargain basement price of $0. You can find that textbook at this link conveniently in the syllabus. That will take you here to openstackscollege.org. The textbook that we're using is College Physics. You'll notice there's also a University Physics at that same site. Don't use that one. And you can access the book a number of different ways. You can view it online as a web page, which is what I'm doing right now. You also have the options of accessing the book. Come on. Either as a PDF file. You can order a print copy for like $40. I would not suggest it, but you could if you're that kind of person. You could download it on iBooks. The iBooks version is optimized for your iPads, but it will cost you like $5, right? It might be worth it because it does have some bells and whistles that the PDF wouldn't have, but it's super helpful. And you can see there's other options, like if you have a Kindle, you can pull it down that way. But there's lots of ways to have access to the book, and it ideally won't cost you anything. You don't have to do any sort of homework codes or anything like that. All the homeworks are integrated into Canvas, and don't require any additional expenditure of cash for you guys, because I'm trying to make things affordable. Because believe me, I was a college student once too, and I know how it goes. All right, the last big requirement that you're going to need for this class, and this is something different from, say, in the spring, if you had me in the spring, and that's a webcam and a microphone, right? You have to have one. There's no way around it. During the spring, we didn't opt to use a lot of the security measures that online courses have typically required at JCSU, specifically things like the lockdown browser or the Respondus monitor. Those are things that allow us to control the test environment during exams and prevent cheating. And because we had students who they didn't sign up for an online class, they weren't expecting to take an online class, uh, we didn't feel that it was fair to them to require those same bits of technology because they may not have had them. However, this time it's an online class from the beginning. You know it going in. And so we're going to have those same expectations about exam security that we would have had previously. And in order to make those work, you have to have a working webcam and you have to have a working microphone. If you don't have one of those things, you need to let me know so we can figure out what sort of arrangements we can make to make your exam environment secure. And you need to have this conversation with me well in advance of the exam, right? Don't wait until an hour before the exam is due to tell me, oh yeah, I can't take the exam. Oh well, that's too late, right? Be proactive about this. It's your responsibility to make sure you meet those requirements. That's why I put it in the syllabus. In terms of what I'm expecting from you guys, both 241 and 242 use the same grading scheme. Both classes, I usually give 3 exams. Of those 3 exams, I'm going to drop the lowest of the exams and average the other 2. And that average will be 25% of your final grade. There's a cumulative final exam given at the end. That cumulative final exam is going to be worth 20% of your final grade in and of itself. However, you'll notice the little asterisks in the syllabus. That says that the final exam rule applies. And the way the final exam rule works is if your final exam is higher than your exam average, then I toss your exam average out and replace it with the final. The idea is that if you had a really rough start at the beginning of the semester, but you pulled it together and you did great by the end, I think that should be worth something. I want you guys to have an incentive to not give up if you had a bad start. And that's what the final exam rule is about. It doesn't work backwards, by the way. If you did great on the exams all semester long, but then you have a brain hemorrhage for the final exam and you fail it, well, them's the breaks, and that lousy final exam grade is going to have to count 20% of your final grade. There's also lab reports. Generally, you're going to have about one lab report every week. Those are 20% of your grade. That includes both labs and also pre-lab and post-lab exercises as they apply. But all of that is 20% of your grade. There's also quizzes. 15% of your grade is going to come from daily quizzes. They won't necessarily happen every day, but they'll happen most days. Usually they're conceptual in nature. The idea is that they should take you, 10 to 15 minutes to finish at most. And I will drop your lowest 3 of those exams. The last thing is your homework, and the homework is the most important part of this class. It's worth 20% of your grade. However, I only require 90% of the homework that I assign during the summers. That number is a little bit lower than it usually is, and the reason is because you have fewer hours in which to do homework. So I can't expect you to do as much homework, but I still want you to have access to them, and I'm still putting the same amount of homework out there. You only have to do 90% of it. If you do more than 90% of it, that's extra credit. It's built into the course. So, what I have found is that students who don't do the homework almost never pass the class. So it's super, super important that you do that homework. All of those are in Canvas. You can see them now. So that's the big stuff. Attendance policy. This is not really, there isn't really one. Again, I'm going to be recording new videos every day at what would have been the normal class time. You are highly encouraged and certainly welcome to sit in for those, but it's by no means required. Those will all be available on video for you to be viewing asynchronously should you need to do so. It also means that there shouldn't be any sort of makeup exams because all the assignments are asynchronous. So I don't have to worry about any kinds of makeup assignments because you have big windows for all of those things, plus lots of drops. Late work, the way the policy is going to work is that assignments are going to get docked 14% every day. That's going to give you roughly a week before the amount of credit just ekes away to 0. So, at whatever the stated due date is, if you turn it in after that, you'll get progressively less credit as time goes by. That can dwindle down to as low as 0 if you wait more than about a week. I think that's pretty much it. All right, let's talk about the modules. Make sure you're familiar with how that's going to work. I strongly suggest that when you navigate your Canvas site, you use the actual web version of the Canvas site rather than the app. The app doesn't organize things in the same way, and it's sometimes not as good. There are certain things that don't work very well. But if you look in the main home view, you'll see this list of modules, and obviously you're watching the intro video now, so good on you. In order for you to do any of the other stuff in the course, you'll notice they all have prerequisites listed for completing this Getting Started module, and that's this one up here. You'll have to do that. You'll have to submit proof of validation via this link. A photocopy, a photograph of whatever is good. I'll be checking the validation list as we go. I checked it a few minutes ago and it hadn't been populated yet, but I'll check again in the morning to see who's there. So if you see this get validated thing has you already listed as validated, you're good to go. It means that I validated and saw that you were verified. But by submitting proof here, you'll expedite that process. Lastly, there's a survey. That's going to be a survey about what kind of technology you have access to, what times you're available or need me to be available, stuff like that. Doing these 3 items is also going to establish your attendance for the week. And that's important, particularly in this first week. because if you don't interact with any of these web assignments, I can't prove that you're here. And if that's the case, after about 10 days, they have the audit period end. And at that point, they administratively withdraw anyone who hasn't participated in the course up until that point. So please, please, please do this survey. That's the thing that will establish your attendance during this first week. So super, super important. You'll see a list. This is where I'm going to post videos to each day. And oftentimes I'm going to have a discussion board with each of those videos. The idea being that you guys can talk amongst yourselves. You can ask questions amongst yourselves about those videos. I'll be throwing extra credit points at people who are helpful to your fellow students on these discussion boards, because I think it helps keep the community of the class whole, even though we're all separated. And I can also throw in some answers to questions in there as well. But that's where you'll be seeing those. Here's where your daily quizzes will be populating. Here's where your labs will be populating. Here's the lab report resources, where it's going to walk you through what your lab report should look like, what I expect from them. We'll talk more about that down the line. I don't need to go into all of that right now in this intro video. And then, of course, you've got lots and lots of homeworks. So you'll see that these will all open up as soon as you've done the getting started module, and you'll be able to answer your questions there in a pretty straightforward manner. Other places that you should probably be familiar with, obviously, here's where the announcements will go. I'll be communicating to you guys a lot with announcements. I highly recommend that you have your Canvas settings set so that new announcements will show up on your emails. Most students do by default. In fact, they don't often realize that I'm not emailing them. I'm just putting an announcement up. But that's how I'll let you know about things like when due dates are going to be. I haven't set a firm date on when the exams will happen. Based on previous experience, my suspicion is that the first exam will not happen this week, but it will happen probably Wednesday or Thursday of next week. That's super, super fast. But bear in mind, each class period is like 2 hours worth of stuff. And usually the first exam is going to cover the first couple of chapters in either course, either chapters 2 and 3 in the case of 241, or chapters 18 and 19 in the case of 242. And usually that will end up taking us about 7 class periods to cover that amount of stuff. So we're going to get that probably, pretty soon. Here's where you'll download Lockdown Browser. That'll be important for taking exams. I'll have a test assignment that you'll use before you take an exam, just to verify that all the technical bugs are worked out, so that we can fix the problems on the mock assignment before we go in to do the real thing that counts. But other than that, I think that's pretty well straightforward. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm happy to answer them. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys again, or for some of you to see you for the first time. So let's have a good summer and let's learn some physics.